The job sounded perfect. Night watchman at an old warehouse on the edge of town. Decent pay, minimal hassle, and a chance to wear a uniform again. After leaving my gig as a mall cop, I craved that sense of authority, the quiet thrill of patrolling empty halls. But when I arrived at the warehouse for my first shift, something felt wrong. The air was too still, the shadows too deep, and the building seemed to hum with a life of its own. I'd been out of work for weeks, scraping by in my small apartment in a sleepy Minnesota town. At 28, I wasn't lazy, just practical. Do the job, do it well, but don't overreach. The warehouse gig came through a friend of a friend, a guy named Carl who managed the property. He was eager, almost too eager to hire me. "It's easy," he said over the phone, his voice oddly rushed. "Just keep an eye on things. Nobody bothers the place." The pay was well above average, which should have been my first red flag, but I was too excited to care. Christmas was coming, and I was already dreaming of the trip to visit my folks in Milwaukee, cracking open beers and swapping stories. The night of my first shift, I lounged in my cluttered apartment, binge watching a crime drama until 6 p.m. I didn't bother tidying up. Living alone meant no one cared about my mess. I'd picked up my uniform from Carl's house a few days earlier, which struck me as odd. Why not at the warehouse? Still, I shrugged it off, slipped into the crisp navy jacket, and grabbed my flashlight, keys, and nightstick. The drive to the warehouse was a slog. The roads were icy, and even at dusk, traffic crawled. My shift started at 8 p.m., but a pileup on the highway delayed me nearly an hour. By the time I arrived, my excitement had soured into irritation. The warehouse loomed at the end of a gravel road, a hulking concrete box surrounded by frost-covered fields. Behind it, a dense forest stretched into the darkness, its bare trees clawing at the sky. The building's front had a single steel door secured with a heavy padlock. I parked my beat-up sedan nearby, grabbed my gear, and stepped into the biting cold. The silence was oppressive. No cars, no birds, just the crunch of my boots on the gravel. I fumbled with the keys, my breath clouding in the air, and unlocked the padlock. The door groaned as I pushed it open, revealing a cavernous interior. Inside, the warehouse was a maze of tall metal shelves stacked with crates and boxes. A narrow walkway led to a small office at the far end where a desk, a chair, and a flickery of fluorescent light waited. Above, a rusted catwalk ran along the walls, creaking faintly in the draft. I closed the door behind me, the clang echoing like a gunshot. The place felt alive, as if the shadows were watching. I shook off the unease and headed to the office, my footsteps loud in the stillness. At the desk, I found a battered employee handbook and a folded piece of paper tucked beneath it. The paper was yellowed, its edges frayed, and the word rules was scrawled at the top in smudged ink. The handwriting was jagged, like it was written in a hurry. It read, "Rules for the night watch. Follow these or you won't make it to morning. If you hear knocking from inside a crate on the east side of the warehouse, do not investigate. Stand still, face the office, and count to 20 in your head. If a voice whispers your name from the catwalk, ignore it. Do not look up. Reply, 'I'm busy right now,' and keep walking. At 1 a.m., the lights will flicker. Stay at the desk and keep your flashlight off until they stabilize. If you see a shadow move in the corner of your eye, do not follow it. Turn the other way and hum a tune until it's gone. If a man in a gray coat asks you for the time, tell him, 'The clock's broken. Never check your watch.'" I laughed, assuming it was a prank. Carl probably thought he'd scare the new guy. I shoved the paper back in the drawer and skimmed the handbook. Basic stuff about checking locks and reporting trespassers. The job seemed straightforward, but the lack of signal on my ancient flip phone meant no scrolling to pass the time. I tapped my nightstick on the desk, the rhythm keeping me grounded as I glanced at the grainy security feed on a small monitor. Around 10 p.m., a faint thump came from the east side of the warehouse. I froze, my nightstick hovering mid-tap. Another thump, louder this time, like something heavy shifting inside a crate. My mind flashed to the rules. Do not investigate. Count to 20. I faced the office, my heart pounding, and started counting in my head. 1, 2, 3. The thumping grew frantic, like something was clawing at the crate's walls. Sweat beaded on my forehead, but I kept counting. 18, 19, 20. The noise stopped, leaving only silence. I exhaled, my hands trembling. Maybe it was just a rat. I resumed my patrol, walking the aisles between shelves. The air felt heavier now, the shadows sharper. As I passed under the catwalk, a whisper cut through the quiet. Daniel. My name, soft and hissing, came from above. My stomach dropped. I kept my eyes on the floor, remembering the rules. I'm busy right now, I said, my voice shaking. The whisper didn't return, but the hairs on my neck stood up. I quickened my pace, the rules now clutched in my hand like a lifeline. By 12:30 a.m., I was back at the desk, trying to steady my breathing. The rules weren't a prank. They couldn't be. Whatever was in this warehouse wasn't human. I checked my phone, 12:58 a.m. The lights began to flicker, just as the rules predicted. I shoved my flashlight under the desk, my pulse racing. The flickering intensified, the bulbs buzzing like angry insects. Shadows danced on the walls, twisting into shapes that didn't make sense. Long limbs, eyeless faces. I gripped the desk, willing myself to stay calm. After what felt like an eternity, the lights steadied, and the warehouse fell silent again. I barely had time to relax when a shadow darted across the aisle in my peripheral vision. My instinct was to turn, but the rules screamed in my head, "Do not follow it." I spun the other way, humming a shaky rendition of Happy Birthday as I stared at the wall. The shadow lingered at the edge of my vision, stretching unnaturally across the floor. My humming grew louder, desperate. Finally, it vanished, and I collapsed into the chair, my heart hammering. At 2 a.m., a new sound broke the silence. A low, rhythmic scratching from a crate near the entrance. It wasn't on the east side, so the rules didn't apply, but the noise set my nerves on edge. I gripped my nightstick, debating whether to check it out. The scratching grew louder, more deliberate, like nails on a chalkboard. Against my better judgment, I crept toward the sound, my flashlight beam cutting through the dark. The crate was unmarked, its wood splintered. The scratching stopped as I approached, replaced by a faint giggle, high-pitched and childlike. I backed away, my skin crawling, and returned to the desk. As I sat, a figure appeared at the edge of the office light. A man in a tattered gray coat. His face was pale, his eyes sunken, and his lips curled into a crooked smile. "What's the time?" he asked, his voice low and gravelly. My mouth went dry. The rules. "The clock's broken," I said, forcing the words out. He tilted his head, staring at me for a long moment, then turned and shuffled into the darkness. I didn't breathe until he was gone. The rest of the night was a blur of paranoia. Every creak, every shadow felt like a threat. I kept the rules in my pocket, rereading them obsessively. At 4 a.m., a new sound started, a soft sobbing from outside the warehouse near the forest. It sounded like a woman, her cries raw and desperate. "Help me, please!" My heart twisted, but I remembered the rules from the original story. Do not investigate. I stayed at the desk, my hands over my ears until the sobbing faded. By 5 a.m., I was a wreck, my nerves frayed to the breaking point. Then I saw it, a figure standing at the far end of the warehouse, barely visible in the dim light. It was tall, impossibly thin, with arms that hung too long. Its head was tilted at an unnatural angle, and it was watching me. I froze, my breath catching. The rules didn't mention this. The figure took a step forward, its movements jerky, like a puppet on strings. I grabbed my nightstick and bolted for the door. My only thought to escape, the steel door was heavier than I remembered, but adrenaline gave me strength. I shoved it open, the cold air hitting me like a slap. I sprinted to my car, fumbling with the keys. Behind me, the warehouse was silent, but I felt eyes on me, boring into my back. I started the engine and peeled out, gravel flying. In the rearview mirror, I saw the figure standing at the warehouse door, its head still tilted, watching me go. I never went back. I quit the next day, ignoring Carl's calls. A week later, I found an article online. Warehouse night guard missing after first shift. The police found his car outside, keys still in the ignition. No trace of him. I knew what had happened, even if no one would believe me. The warehouse wasn't just a building, it was a trap, a place where something ancient and hungry waited. I'd broken no rules, but I'd been lucky. The next guy wasn't. If you ever get a job that sounds too good to be true, walk away. Trust your gut. Some places aren't meant for the living.